As a neonatal nurse, Emily had seen many babies, but she had never before seen a situation quite like this one. After the birth, the parents were nowhere to be found, and the baby remained at the hospital, abandoned and unclaimed. Overwhelmed by compassion, Emily decided to adopt the baby herself, and for the past 10 years, she raised him with unconditional love that could rival that of a biological parent. However, when the baby's true parentage came to light, she might have wished she wouldn't. Emily remembered the day from 10 years ago like it was yesterday. It had been a rather busy day in the ward, as it seemed that a lot of babies were born that fateful day. A total of 5 girls and 9 boys, which was certainly a daily record, at least for as long as Emily had worked there. Yet, that wasn't the only thing that would set apart this day from any other. Emily had always loved working with newborns, and loved the fact that she could be a part of the start of someone's life in this meaningful way. They were at their most helpless, especially if they were put under her care. You see, a neonatal nurse usually only cares for babies who have a medical condition, like being born too soon, and that was the case for 3 babies that day. 2 beautiful boys and a cute girl had been placed in her care, and she did the best she could to care for them. They were called Daniel, Eva, and Tyler, and they were a joy to work with. Not fussy like other cases she had come in contact with. However, she had expected to part from all of them. Instead, fate seemed to have other plans. As soon as Tyler's medical complications started to subside, his parents came to take him home. The same could be said for Eva, but even after the hospital had the dismissal form ready for Daniel, there didn't seem to be anyone coming to claim him. "They will come back, you see," Emily said, cooing to the infant as he was playing with her fingers, grabbing them. She hoped that she was right about this. However, unfortunately, she wasn't. Days seemed to pass, and the hospital had tried everything to contact his parents, but it seemed as if they had disappeared from the face of the earth. Emily couldn't help but feel sorry for baby Daniel, as adoption or foster care was the next possibility, and for a kid like him, that couldn't be easy. You see, Daniel's birth had been a difficult one. It had been one of the reasons why he had been in her neonatal care in the first place, and it didn't look good on his record either. She couldn't help but feel the fear of Daniel not only being abandoned by his biological parents, but also by possible adoptive parents. With that fear hammering in her chest, she knew what she had to do. She had a nice paying job and a mortgage-free home in a neighborhood that was great and safe for kids. She knew she could be eligible for it if she filed the request. She bit her lip as she looked at the tiny hand wrapped around her pointer finger. She couldn't help but feel a surge of love come over her. "Who knows? It might just be you and me versus the world," she whispered. After talking to the doctors and the hospital administrator, they had come to the conclusion that Daniel's parents would most likely never return for the babe. It broke Emily's heart, but she knew it wouldn't take long for the CPS workers to snatch him away from her. She simply couldn't bear the thought of it, and decided to send her own application, hoping she would be able to adopt Daniel and make sure he always felt loved. It didn't take long for Child Protection Services to stand before the hospital doors, saying they came to take the baby. Emily had nearly been into tears as they took him, as she had started to form a bond with the infant. When she tried to ask for more information, the woman from CPS only had a quick response for her that didn't shed light in the slightest on the situation. "Your application is being processed, and a screening will be conducted. We want to ensure that Daniel will be placed in the best possible home." Emily would have been relieved to hear this, if it wasn't for the woman's robotic and stoic demeanor. It had been days, and her nerves were getting to her when she finally got the call. The phone rang, breaking the tense silence in Emily's living room. Her heart pounded as she picked it up. "Hello, is this Emily?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes, it is." she replied, holding her breath. "Congratulations! You've been approved to adopt Daniel," the voice announced. Emily's eyes welled up with tears of joy. She thanked the caller repeatedly before hanging up and letting out a triumphant shout. Emily couldn't wait to share the news. She called her parents first. "Mom! Dad! I'm officially Daniel's mom!" she exclaimed. Their joyous reactions brought tears to her eyes again. Next, she called her best friend, Lisa, who squealed with excitement. At work, her colleagues surprised her with a small celebration, complete with balloons and cake. Everyone was genuinely happy for her, showering her with hugs and congratulations. With a newfound energy, Emily began preparing for Daniel's arrival. She visited several baby stores, excitedly picking out a crib, a changing table, and countless adorable outfits. She chose a cheerful jungle theme for the nursery, complete with cute animal wall decals and soft plush toys. Every item she selected was chosen with love and care, ensuring that Daniel would feel safe and welcomed in his new home. Emily spent hours decorating the nursery, making sure everything was perfect. She painted the walls a soft, calming green and carefully applied the animal decals. She arranged the furniture thoughtfully, ensuring plenty of space for Daniel to play as he grew older. She even hung a mobile above the crib, watching it spin gently. Standing in the finished nursery, she felt a sense of pride and anticipation. With the nursery ready, Emily turned her attention to finalizing the adoption paperwork. She meticulously reviewed every document, ensuring all details were correct. Meeting with her lawyer, she signed the final forms, feeling a wave of relief and happiness wash over her. She began making plans for Daniel's future, envisioning the life they would share together. Filled with hope and contentment, Emily felt ready for the journey ahead. Emily's hands gripped the steering wheel as she navigated through traffic. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of nerves and excitement. She glanced at the empty car seat in the back, imagining Daniel finally filling it. Pulling into the CPS parking lot, she took a deep breath. "This is it," she whispered to herself, stepping out of the car. She walked towards the entrance, her heart racing with anticipation for the moment she had been waiting for. Emily's eyes lit up when she saw Daniel. The CPS worker handed him to her, and she felt an overwhelming rush of love and responsibility. Daniel's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, and she couldn't stop smiling. "Hi there, little guy," she cooed, holding him close. As they left the building, she felt a new chapter of her life beginning, filled with the promise of joy and challenges ahead. As Emily drove home, Daniel dozed peacefully in his car seat. Memories of her own adoption surfaced, bringing a tear to her eye. She remembered the warmth of her adoptive parents and the love they had given her. "We're going to be just fine, Daniel," she said softly, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. Each mile brought them closer to home and to the start of their new life together. Emily carried Daniel into the house, his eyes wide with curiosity. She showed him the nursery, filled with colorful toys and books. "This is your new home," she said, placing him gently in his crib. Daniel gurgled happily, grabbing at a plush giraffe. Emily laughed, feeling a surge of happiness. She spent the rest of the day playing with him, reading stories, and making sure he felt safe and loved. That night, Emily sat in the rocking chair, holding Daniel close. The room was quiet. The only sound was Daniel's soft breathing. "I promise you, Daniel, you'll always be loved and safe," she whispered, echoing the words her adoptive parents had once said to her. She kissed his forehead, feeling a deep connection. As she laid him in the crib, she felt ready for whatever the future held, knowing they would face it together. 10 years later, Daniel slammed the front door behind him, his backpack dragging on the floor. Emily looked up from the kitchen, noticing his red, frustrated face. "Hey, Daniel, what's wrong?" she asked, walking over to him. He shrugged, dropping his backpack with a thud. "Just had a rough day," he muttered. Emily frowned, her heart aching. She sat down at the table, waiting for him to share more. After a moment of silence, Daniel looked at Emily, his eyes filled with hurt. "They were teasing me at school," he said quietly. "They called me the adopted kid." Emily's heart sank. She reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. Kids can be really mean sometimes," she said softly. He nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "Why do they care so much?" Emily pulled Daniel into a hug, feeling his small frame tremble. "When I was your age, I went through the same thing," she said. "Kids teased me about being adopted, too." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Really?" Emily nodded, sharing stories of the challenges she faced growing up. "But remember, being adopted means we were chosen, Daniel. That's something special," she said gently, hoping to comfort him. Daniel sat quietly for a moment, then looked up with curiosity in his eyes. "Mom, do you know my real parents' names?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew this day would come, but wasn't prepared for it. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why do you ask, honey?" she said, buying herself a moment to think. "I just want to know," Daniel replied softly. Emily hesitated, then decided to protect Daniel from potential hurt. "I don't know their names, sweetheart," she said, her voice calm and steady. Daniel's shoulders slumped in disappointment. "Oh, okay," he mumbled. Emily pulled him into another hug, feeling the weight of her decision. "But I do know they missed out on having a wonderful son like you," she said, trying to bring a smile to his face. "Mom, why did they leave me at the hospital?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking the silence. Emily felt a lump in her throat. "I don't know, Daniel," she said, struggling with her feelings. She wished she had answers for him. Maybe they had their reasons, but it wasn't because of you. Daniel looked at her, searching her face for reassurance. Emily squeezed his hand, hoping it would be enough for now. To take his mind off the day's troubles, Emily suggested watching Daniel's favorite movies. "How about a movie night?" she asked with a smile. Daniel nodded eagerly. They spent the evening on the couch, wrapped in blankets, munching on popcorn. They laughed at the funny parts and whispered during the intense scenes. By the end of the night, Daniel seemed more relaxed, his earlier worries momentarily forgotten. Before bed, Emily tucked Daniel in, sitting beside him. "You know, no matter what, you are so loved," she said softly. "Your worth isn't defined by where you come from, but by who you are." Daniel looked up at her, eyes wide. "Really?" he asked. "Really," Emily confirmed, stroking his hair. "Our family loves you just the way you are." Daniel smiled, hugging his pillow. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered. After Daniel had fallen asleep, Emily quietly made her way to the living room. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. She started searching for any information about Daniel's biological parents. The room was silent except for the sound of her typing. She knew it was a long shot, but she had to try. She wanted to understand more about Daniel's history, even if it was difficult. Despite her discomfort, Emily's determination kept her searching. She clicked through pages and pages, reading every snippet of information carefully. She knew she was venturing into sensitive territory, but her love for Daniel drove her. "I have to know," she whispered to herself. As the hours passed, she grew more frustrated but didn't give up. She needed to find something, anything that could help her piece together Daniel's past. As Emily scrolled through old files and records, a few names popped up that she vaguely remembered. Daniel's birth parents. But the information was sparse, just names without any substantial background. Frustration grew as she clicked through page after page, each one yielding little to no results. "There has to be more," she muttered, determined to find something meaningful that could give Daniel some answers about his past. Emily decided to dig deeper into the hospital records, hoping to find a missed detail. After several hours, she stumbled upon a name she hadn't noticed before: Judith Collins. The name was listed as an emergency contact, possibly Daniel's biological grandmother. Her heart skipped a beat. This could be it, she thought, scribbling down the name and any associated details. It was a small lead, but it was something. Emily wrote down the address she found connected to Margaret Collins. She knew she needed to approach this carefully. She planned to visit Margaret while Daniel was at school. Sitting at the kitchen table, she mapped out her day, making sure everything was in place. "I hope this brings some answers," she whispered to herself, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety about what she might uncover. Emily spent the evening preparing herself mentally for the visit. She felt a mix of apprehension and hope about what she might find. What if Margaret had the answers Daniel was seeking? Or what if she didn't want to talk at all? Emily tried to brace herself for any possible outcome. "I just need to do this for Daniel," she thought, taking deep breaths and trying to stay calm. The next morning, Emily waved Daniel off to school, trying to keep her nerves in check. "Have a great day, sweetheart," she called out, giving him a reassuring smile. As soon as he was out of sight, she grabbed her car keys, her hand trembling slightly. "This is it," she told herself, taking a deep breath. She knew the day ahead could change everything, but she was ready to face it for Daniel. Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel as she navigated through the quiet neighborhood. The houses blurred past as her mind raced with possibilities. She double-checked the address she had written down and slowed as she approached the right house. "Here we go," she whispered, taking a deep breath. Parking the car, she stepped out and walked up the path to the front door, her heart pounding. Emily hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door. After a few seconds, it creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with a puzzled expression. "Hello? Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gentle but wary. "Hi, my name is Emily," she began, her nerves evident. "Are you Margaret?" The woman nodded slowly. "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" Emily shook her head, taking a deep breath. "I'm looking for Richard and Anna," Emily said, watching Margaret's reaction closely. The elderly woman frowned, shaking her head. "I haven't seen them in years," she admitted. "Do you know where they might be?" Emily asked hopefully. Margaret sighed, a look of sadness crossing her face. "No, I'm afraid I don't. They just disappeared one day." Emily's heart sank at the news, but she pressed on gently. Margaret invited Emily inside, and they sat at the kitchen table. "I did receive letters from them for a while," Margaret shared, her eyes distant with memories. "But eventually, the letters stopped. I miss them dearly, and have no idea where they are now." Emily listened intently, feeling a pang of sympathy for the woman. "Would you like some tea?" Margaret offered, and Emily nodded, grateful for the warmth. As they sipped their tea, Emily explained her reason for visiting. "I adopted a boy named Daniel," she began, watching Margaret's reaction. "He was abandoned at the hospital 10 years ago." Margaret's eyes widened, her hand trembling slightly. "Daniel, my grandson?" she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Emily nodded. "Yes, I believe so." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, her curiosity about her grandson evident. Emily took a deep breath and began explaining Daniel's background. "He was left at the hospital as a newborn," she said softly. "I was his neonatal nurse and couldn't bear the thought of him going into the system. So, I adopted him." Margaret listened, tears welling up in her eyes. "I love him as my own," Emily continued. "He's a wonderful boy, and he deserves to know where he came from." Margaret's eyes filled with tears as she realized the impact of her son and daughter-in-law's disappearance. "I never knew what happened to them," she said, her voice shaking. "It broke my heart when they stopped writing. And now to hear about Daniel. It's overwhelming." Emily reached out, placing a comforting hand on Margaret's arm. "I understand," she said gently. "It's a lot to take in." Margaret's emotions shifted, and she became defensive. "Why did you come here?" she asked, her tone sharp. Emily sighed, understanding the confusion and pain behind the question. "I came because Daniel is starting to ask questions," she explained. "I want to give him answers, but I also want to protect him. I needed to know more about his family, to understand his past, so I can help him with his future." Margaret's defensive posture softened as she listened to Emily's story. Tears streamed down her face. "You've given him so much love and care," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't thank you enough for that." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I want to meet him, Emily. I want to see my grandson." Emily nodded, her heart aching for Margaret. "Of course," she said softly. "We'll make it happen." Emily and Margaret discussed how best to introduce her to Daniel. "I think it would be best if we said you were an old family friend," Emily suggested. Margaret agreed, understanding the need for caution. "That sounds good," she said, nodding. They planned the meeting carefully, choosing a neutral location and deciding on the best way to ease Daniel into this new relationship. Both felt a mix of nerves and hope. Margaret and Emily decided on the plan. Margaret would meet Daniel under the guise of being an old family friend. "It's the best way to ease him into it," Emily said, and Margaret nodded in agreement. That afternoon, they made their way back to Emily's house, both women feeling a mix of nervousness and anticipation. "This is it," Margaret whispered, trying to calm her racing heart. Once at Emily's home, they took a few moments to prepare. Emily showed Margaret around, pointing out Daniel's favorite spots. "He loves to read here," she said, gesturing to a cozy corner. Margaret smiled, taking it all in. "He's a lucky boy to have you," she said softly. Emily squeezed Margaret's hand. "Thank you." "Let's make this a good day for him," she replied, trying to ease the tension. When Daniel arrived home, Emily greeted him warmly. "Daniel, I want you to meet Margaret," she said. "She's an old family friend." Daniel looked at Margaret curiously. "Hi," he said shyly. "Hello, Daniel," Margaret replied with a warm smile. They all sat down together, and Emily encouraged them to talk. At first, the conversation was cautious, but soon Daniel began to share stories about school and his interests. After a while, Daniel excused himself to go to the bathroom. As soon as he was out of earshot, Margaret pulled Emily aside. "Emily, can I talk to you for a moment?" she whispered urgently. Emily nodded, leading her to the kitchen. "What's on your mind?" she asked, noticing the concerned look on Margaret's face. Margaret hesitated, clearly struggling with what she was about to say. Margaret glanced toward the hallway, ensuring Daniel was out of earshot. "I don't think Daniel resembles our family," she said quietly. Emily frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asked. Margaret shook her head, trying to articulate her thoughts. "There are certain features. "He doesn't seem to have any of them," she said, her voice filled with uncertainty. Emily's mind raced, wondering what this could mean for Daniel. Emily and Margaret were deep in conversation, trying to make sense of Margaret's observation about Daniel. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, startling them both. Emily glanced at Margaret, then stood up. "I'll get it," she said, her heart pounding. She walked to the door, curiosity and apprehension swirling in her mind. Opening it, she was greeted by the sight of a family of 3 standing on her porch. The family outside looked anxious and a bit out of place. Emily's eyes quickly scanned their faces, a man, a woman, and a young boy. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man stepped forward, his expression serious but kind. "Hi, my name is Adam," he began. "We're here to talk about Daniel. Could we speak with him, please?" Emily's mind raced with questions, but she managed to keep her composure. "Of course. Please come in," she said, stepping aside to let them enter. She led them to the living room, her mind buzzing with uncertainty. As they settled into the seats, Emily glanced at Margaret, who looked just as puzzled. "Can I get you anything?" she offered, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. Adam shook his head, looking grateful yet tense. "No, thank you," he said. "We just really need to speak with Daniel." Emily nodded, still unsure of their connection to her son, but willing to hear them out. She called Daniel to the living room, her heart in her throat. "Daniel, there are some people here to see you," she said gently, hoping to keep him calm amidst the unexpected visitors. Daniel walked into the room, curiosity etched on his face. "Hi," he said, looking at the unfamiliar faces. Emily placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Daniel, this is Adam and his family," she said, her voice steady, but her mind swirling with questions. The room felt charged with anticipation as everyone waited for the next words, the air thick with unspoken emotions and mysteries yet to be unraveled. In the living room, the visitors introduced themselves. "I'm Adam, and this is my wife, Lisa, and our son, Tyler," the man said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Tyler gave a small wave, looking nervous. Emily glanced at Daniel, who seemed confused but curious. "Nice to meet you all," Emily said politely. "What brings you here today?" Adam took a deep breath, preparing to explain their visit. Adam began to explain. "There was a mix-up at the hospital," he said, his eyes meeting Emily's. "Tyler and Daniel were switched at birth." Emily gasped, her heart pounding. "We found out when Tyler had some medical tests done," Adam continued. "It's been a long and difficult journey to find Tyler's biological family." Emily felt a rush of emotions, struggling to process the shocking news. Lisa spoke up, her voice trembling. "Tyler has a medical condition that requires a specific type of donor," she explained. "The hospital wouldn't give us information about his biological family due to privacy laws, so we had to search on our own." Emily's heart ached for them. "We hoped finding Daniel's adoption papers might lead us to the right donor," Adam added. Daniel listened intently, trying to grasp the situation. Emily was stunned by the revelation. She took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "I had no idea," she said softly. "I've been searching for Daniel's biological parents, Richard and Anna, but I haven't found them yet." Adam and Lisa exchanged a hopeful look. "Any information could help," Adam said. "We're willing to do whatever it takes for Tyler." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. Just then, Margaret entered the room, her eyes widening as she saw Tyler. She froze, her hand covering her mouth. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. He looks just like Richard. The room fell silent, everyone processing Margaret's words. Are you related to him? Adam said gently. She nodded, still staring at Tyler. Yes, I'm Daniel's grandmother, she said, her voice breaking. Margaret couldn't take her eyes off Tyler. He looks so much like Richard, she murmured. Then, turning to Adam and Lisa, she said, If you need a donor, I'll get tested. Anything to help. Adam and Lisa exchanged hopeful glances. Thank you, Lisa said, tears in her eyes. It means so much to us. Margaret nodded, determined. We're family, after all, she said firmly, feeling a new sense of purpose. Adam cleared his throat. We'd like to formally meet Daniel, if that's okay, he said, his voice filled with sincerity. We want to explain our situation and our hopes directly. Emily glanced at Daniel, who was listening quietly. She nodded. I think it's important for him to know the truth, she said. She turned to Daniel, giving him a reassuring smile. Are you ready to hear more, Daniel? She asked gently. Emily agreed, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. Daniel deserves to know his biological family, she said, her voice steady. She looked at Daniel, who nodded slowly. Okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily took his hand, squeezing it gently. We're all here for you, she assured him. Turning to Adam and Lisa, she added, Let's do this together. They all moved to the living room, preparing for an emotional conversation. In the living room, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Adam and Lisa took turns explaining the mix-up at the hospital, their search for Daniel, and Tyler's medical condition. Emily and Margaret listened intently, occasionally wiping away tears. We never wanted this to happen, Adam said, his voice breaking. But we're so grateful to have found you. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of their words. We'll figure this out together, she said, her voice filled with determination. Daniel finally met Tyler, the boy who shared such a complex tie with him. They stood facing each other, unsure but curious. Hi, Daniel said quietly. Hi, Tyler replied, a small smile on his face. The adults watched, their hearts full of emotion. This is your brother, Emily said softly, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel looked at Tyler, beginning to understand the tangled web of their lives. We'll figure it out, he said, feeling a mix of confusion and hope. Daniel sat quietly, absorbing everything he had just learned about his origins. The shock was overwhelming, but alongside it was a sense of relief. He finally had answers. Emily sat beside him, her presence comforting. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? She asked softly. Daniel nodded, his mind racing. Yeah, but I'm glad I know the truth now, he said, looking up at her with a small, hopeful smile. Despite the revelations, Daniel continued to live with Emily, who he considered his true mother. Their bond remained strong, and they navigated this new chapter together. You're my mom, no matter what, Daniel said one evening. Emily hugged him tightly. And you're my son, she replied, her voice full of love. They continued their routines, finding comfort in the familiar, even as they adjusted to the new realities of their lives. Daniel and Tyler began to develop a friendship, finding common ground in their unique situation. They played video games, shared stories, and discovered they had more in common than they initially thought. It's weird, but kinda cool, Tyler said one day. Daniel laughed, agreeing. Yeah, we're like brothers now, he said. The two boys grew closer, supporting each other as they navigated their intertwined lives and new family dynamics. Adam and Lisa frequently expressed their gratitude to Emily for her care of Daniel. You've done an incredible job raising him, Lisa said, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for being his family. Emily smiled, touched by their words. He's brought so much joy into my life, she replied. They acknowledged the importance of Emily's role, recognizing her as an integral part of Daniel's family, forever connected by love and shared experiences. The story closed on a hopeful note, with everyone adjusting to their new family dynamics. Margaret prepared to help Tyler as a donor, bringing a sense of purpose and unity. "We're all in this together," she said, holding Tyler's hand. Emily, Daniel, Adam, Lisa, and Tyler found their rhythm, embracing their unique family. "We'll make this work," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. And with that, they faced the future, hopeful and united.